Well, welcome everybody. My name's Kevin Lafferty. I'm an executive committee member for the Outdoor Recreation Network, and I have the pleasure of chairing the workshop today. So this is workshop 2, just to check. It's developing actions to widen inclusion for Black minority ethnic groups. And can I just ask everybody to please mute their mics and put themselves on mute? And obviously we can use the raise icon if you want to ask a question. And I'll basically just ask you to obviously share your question with us, and then we can get into the details. So we've got about 45 minutes, and there's about 25 of us on the call just now. I know we have a lot of experience and knowledge, so we want to try and make best use of the time. But I also want to just recap from yesterday, from day one, that Pammy Johal obviously set us a clear challenge about actioning change specifically in this area. How do we actually develop actions to widen inclusion for Black minority ethnic groups? And I think what Pammy did do was to highlight that this has been a discussion that's been happening for a very long time, and there hasn't been enough progress made. And I think right across the sector, we still see that there's a need for us to do more, and for us to be proactive and actually to reach out and to go to communities and groups and not expect communities and groups to come to us. So I think we recognise that. And we also know that there's some really good practice out there. There's some great innovation, and there's some great lessons learned that we can share and hopefully discuss with each other. And then finally, obviously, hopefully most people will be au fait and familiar with the Equality Act from 2010. And obviously the duties and the responsibilities that are part of that act. So this is very much something that all organisations and groups should be mindful of, and should be trying to make sure that actually they're engaging and they're working in partnership to try and overcome some of these barriers. So as we've highlighted, we record today's conversation, and I'm looking for some key points to take back to plenary towards the end. So I wanted to start basically just by looking at what are the barriers facing this group, and just to open that up to discussion. So if people would like to make a contribution or to ask a question, please go ahead. So what are the barriers facing this group? I think we know there are many and varied. But let's just look through. Let's see. Okay, Deborah Perlman, do you want to share?
Hi there. Yes, I just think it's really important to remember that we can't call BAME a group, and we have to remember that this is multiple groups with multiple identities, and each group will have its own barriers. And it's really, really, really important to remember that. So BAME is very contested. So I have a problem with the phrase to start with, but please can we remember that this is multiple groups of people, each with their own identities, each with their own barriers.
Thanks, Deborah. A very valid point. And this is something that has been picked up yesterday in terms of making sure that we use the right terminology, but also that actually what we're talking about is a real kind of wide variety of individual communities and groups. And we need to recognise the differences there and be sensitive to that. So, okay, and when you've finished asking a question, can you just lower your hand again? It just helps us to keep track of, obviously, when new questions are coming in. Yep, so once again, we're just focusing to start with on what are the barriers facing this group. So if people want to share or highlight some of the barriers, I think that would be helpful. From your own experience and from your own knowledge. I think Pammy talked yesterday about opportunity, and there still not being the wide range of opportunities freely available. So I think that's something in terms of facilitated access. Are we actually providing facilitated access, and are we reaching out to try and engage communities and groups who are underrepresented in the outdoors? So if some of the participants have some examples they want to share with us, that would be great. Just either in the chat box or by raising your hand, just let us know. So really encourage you to participate here. Obviously, I'm quite happy to chat away and speak. Okay, Romina, great. We've got a very experienced colleague here that I work very closely with. Romina, do you want to take the mic?
Yeah, I suppose a bit like what Deborah was saying about in Scottish Government, we've had this kind of change about...
Romina, just can you come closer to your mic? It's just a little bit hard to hear you.
Sorry, I think I haven't put my mic down, sorry. I suppose, yeah, I was just a bit about what Deborah was saying, just about the category saying BAME, because I suppose in Scottish Government they've changed the way we categorise, and it's ethnic minority, but also I suppose we recognise, like what Deborah's saying, is that all the different kind of community groups have different kind of barriers, but I suppose I'm just kind of repeating we've been talking about in the last 2 days, just from some of the videos, and obviously what Pammy's been saying about, you know, things like safety, economic kind of deprivation, where people are, how far they live from actual green space. I suppose the lockdown restrictions have kind of highlighted that quite a bit, but also I think there's a big difference between urban kind of communities and rural sort of communities. So I guess just what we heard this morning about, you know, for organisations not having any kind of ethnic minority staff or role modelling, and then even when people do make that first sort of intention to try and engage with different communities of the outdoors, and not always given that first impression isn't always welcomed, kind of thing. So and a bit what they were talking about this morning about if it's not that norm to sort of go into a career in the outdoor or to be accessing the outdoor, then you're already having to break that barrier within your family and community. So it takes quite a lot to even get out there, kind of thing.
And I should share with people the fact that Romina's been working in this area for a very long time, and she manages the engagement strategy that we do in Scottish Forestry. So she has a lot of hands-on experience in terms of the barriers facing this group. So, I mean, I think, Romina, do you want to give a little bit more in terms of what you found some of the kind of common barriers are that maybe are worth sharing with others?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah, I mean, I guess from our point of view, not all we've been specifically trying to engage people into, you know, woodlands and forests and public woodlands and forests. And I guess some of the common kind of barriers that, you know, the community leaders or volunteer community champions like Ruby, we saw her video, has been like, you know, getting to those areas, like transport, but also things like, you know, not even having toilets, which a lot of ex-forestry and land Scotland sites, that has always been kind of a bit of an issue. But also I think they tend to not, what we try and encourage is people to go back themselves, kind of thing. But I think that safety issue is always kind of a thing they don't really want to kind of maybe go out themselves. So being in groups is definitely something that's been kind of a hook, and using, you know, even our cycling projects and you know, looking at International Women's Day or Peace Day or like Black History Month and everything. It's like maybe connecting the valley in the woods. It's connecting sort of events that they would normally do indoors, and we've kind of tried to show how we can do that all in the woods, kind of thing, but not needing a lot of money or funding, kind of thing. They can do it themselves with just some assistance from us. But yeah, I think maybe the economic side, the green space not being close to the communities, and they're maybe coming together, like say in a community centre, a temple or whatever, but then that might not be close to the woodlands that we're talking about. So I think we've had to be quite really flexible in that way, and not, although we might have our own agenda, we have to really be flexible in what, you know, about the groups we work with, kind of thing.
Thanks, Ramina. Some really great points there. I mean, I think in terms of transport, we know that that's one of the key barriers in terms of the cost of that as well. I think access to toilets is really, if you're not used to visiting or using the outdoors, just to have that sort of confidence that there will be a toilet nearby. You know, simple information and reassuring people about some of the safety concerns is absolutely intrinsic to this. Now, I want to just spend another minute or two on this. What are the barriers facing the group? Would anybody else like to contribute in their experience? Do they see additional barriers to the ones? Okay, so we've got Robert Campbell. Robert, can you come in?
Kevin, hi, thanks. Yeah, Robert Campbell, I'm a senior land management for Natural Resources Wales down here in the South Wales valleys, and you know, from our perspective, the same as with all the forestry managers across, you know, interpretation is definitely key. You know, all our maps and our interpretation panels on our sites are predominantly white people, you know, and mountain biking, walking, whatever. It's making sure we address that, and when we, you know, have a strategic plan to get those groups involved with that interpretation. So if you download one of our leaflets, it'll 99% have a white male on it or a white female, and we're not including those groups now, and it's something we're desperate to try and reach out to. But in the same way, the outdoor industry has its part to play as well, in that their interpretation, their media, their campaigns predominantly do the same thing and don't include those groups and communities in a proper way. And I think working in partnership with some of them would be really good. And then as we look at developing new sites or changing sites, you know, are we providing the facilities that those groups need? A good example for us is Cumcarn Forest, you know, right outside Newport, on the doorstep of Cardiff, used by large groups of Asians for all sorts of, and has historically been used by that group for all sorts of festivals and birthdays and parties. And when we spoke to them about why they were using that site and not other sites, it was because we had large areas where they could get large numbers of people in. It was easy for them to do that, whereas a traditional white family might have a birthday party with 5 people. They would turn up with 25 people in 3 minibuses or whatever, which is fantastic. But it's not until we start looking at our facilities and ensure that as we develop the facilities, we make provision for what other groups and communities would like to see, and how they use the outdoors might be slightly differently to how we perceive it.
Yeah, thanks, Robert. That really valid points, and I think in terms of celebrating, faith festivals, that's a big opportunity. That's a big hook potentially to engage a number of communities. Now, once we've made a contribution, can I ask you just to lower your hands again, so that when I know you've got a fresh contribution, I can bring you back in. So this is the last time to ask any additional contributions on barriers facing this group before we move on to the next question. Okay. Yep, we've got one more contribution, Yvonne.
Right, okay. I was just waiting to see if you were calling people who raised their hands, so I'll speak now. I just wanted to add to the conversation that working with Black and Asian and minority groups in the area that I visit and work in is the Peak District National Park. I'm from Sheffield, but there are a lot of barriers, and it will take a longer time for me to highlight everything. But I think one of the things that we need to be able to do is to make sure that when we are working with groups, that we have people who represent those groups, those individuals who want to be inclusive and to be involved in doing things, in accessing the outdoor, that they see people who represent them, who are their role models, who they feel confident with, and the workers or volunteers that are going to engage with them, that they have an understanding of their needs and their culture, to be able to meet those needs and have an understanding when somebody say, I cannot walk this week, or I cannot do something this weekend because it's to do with a family celebration or so on, that there's an understanding that it doesn't assume that people from Black and Asian and minority groups are available every weekend because there are different things that they do. The other thing is that the lack of funding that they can apply for themselves, because they have to go through different hoops, and sometimes because they haven't got a group set up as a charity, they're not able to access those funding to do some of the things that they want to do. I work with people, and I been around for a long time to be able to have an understanding and to work with different organizations to break down some of these barriers, and that has been a success with Peak District Mosaic that I chair in the national park.
That's great, Yvonne. Thanks for sharing that. And I think we've captured a number of those points which will feed back to the wider group. But I think absolutely, you know, Pammy raised this yesterday, that at middle management and the senior management levels, if you look around and all you see is white faces, that's really not representative of trying to make sure the sector is being inclusive and basically is providing the opportunities, to people who've got real skills and real experience, and obviously the opportunity for us to reach out and connect with people and bring them into this sector. That's what we need. We need more young people who are motivated, who have a passion, and they have the skills. So let's work together on that. Now we're going to move on to the second question, and that's how do we work with this group? Now we need to bear in mind that this is not one group, this is multiple communities. You may want to talk about your own experience of the community or the groups that you've worked with, and maybe the lessons learned. So how do we work in partnership? And looking for new contributions here. So if you've already asked your question, could you lower your hand just so we can make sure we're getting we're clear on who's making a raised hand, please. Great. So just trying to keep okay. So again, how do we work in partnership with this group? Now, Yvonne, do you want to say anything more about that? You talked about the Mosaic group there. Do you want to talk a little bit about how that partnership formed and how you managed to bring that together?
So I started out as a champion with Campaign for National Parks from 2008, when they run that successful program for community champions and work with 10 national parks. So following from that, we became volunteer with the Peak District National Park when the Campaign for National Park project ended. And we work in partnership with the Peak District National Park to become volunteers. Then they supported us to become a charity. So we have been working with the National Park and other organizations within the Peak District that have welcomed us and work with us to support those individuals within the community, within Sheffield, within Stoke-on-Trent, within Manchester, to access the National Park. And for example, we work with Chatsworth, an organization that you don't see a lot of non-white people attending and accessing. It is a lot to go to Chatsworth. You have to find £60 for a group of 4 people. However, we have worked with Chatsworth, the education department, to do group trips every December. The last group trip I took to Chatsworth, there were nearly 180 of us, and every single person, apart from one friend, was non-white. And people were amazed of, how do you get to come to this place? How do you know about it? It's by what we do. People see us, we are visible. I am visible in the countryside. People contact me and I just say to churches, to schools, to communities, to my workplace, this is a trip, this is what we want to do. You say you don't know the countryside, this is what Chatsworth is offering us. It is free. You need to meet me at a certain place, and transport is provided. Come and enjoy the grounds, enjoy the house, enjoy the farm, bring the children. Other people would approach us, we're doing this, we can pay for transport. So when people reach out to me, I say yes. And I say yes because they are willing to work with Peak District Mosaic, and they will provide transport, or they will provide reduction to the admission to what they're doing. And it does work. I've seen people enjoy going out into the national park, working in partnership with different groups, whether it's a farmer, whether it's to do with a charity running something, and want to see other people there because they know that we do what we do. And the work is increasing. Sometimes I have to say no, because there's not a lot of trustees who do this work, but we work with people and just try to say to them, this is what is happening. Come and get an understanding of what's out there in the national park. Come and get an understanding about wildlife. Come and understand, get to do a walk. Come and understand how a farm works, or how we go out and look at different things in the national park. Get an understanding of the history of the national park.
Thanks, Yvonne. That's a really fantastic example you've shared with us. And I think it also highlights the importance of the commitment of the land manager or of the public body or organisation you're working with. So you've got to have that sort of partnership, and you have that joint support and collaboration. Now, there's some interesting comments coming in the chat, so I'm going to ask Romina to come back in here. I think, Romina, you've talked about some practical issues around the volunteer expenses and training. Do you want to talk a little bit about your experience of working in partnership with?
Yeah, yeah. So I've worked in the sector quite a few years, but I've worked in for the voluntary sector, as well as now I'm working, well, I've worked with Scottish Forestry for over 11 years, but I guess the difference I've found from working from the voluntary sector, where it is geared up for volunteers and community gatekeepers, is being able to provide that. The infrastructure's there for setting up for training and CPD, and giving that support system, even simple things like out-of-pocket expenses and everything. And I think with specifically maybe for a government department, that is maybe a barrier, in that we don't have those infrastructure. So even although we've been trying to push it with the volunteer community champions, we've had to work in partnership with a third sector body. So we've worked with SEMVO, with the Council for Ethnic Minority Voluntary Organisations, to take that role. But again, a bit like what Kevin's saying, is we can give that role to SEMVO, but again, a bit like what sort of Yvonne's been saying as well, you know, are they going to be visible? Is the people that are actually working with the volunteers and the community champions, are they actually from the communities, or are we just giving that money over to an organisation and then they have no connection with the actual ourselves as an outdoor organisation, or as staff, you know, staff from that community? So I suppose it's a bit of a tricky situation, because we want to make sure we're not always asking community gatekeepers or faith leaders or volunteers to always do everything for free, because they're giving up their time, but also they can be out of pocket expenses. And I suppose in another organisation I've found, in a government department or agency, that is maybe a barrier that we have to try and kind of overcome. So I don't know if other people have had that experience as well.
Yeah, and I think, Romina, a very valid point, especially when the work that we've done with asylum seekers and refugees, that, you know, that difference of having those travel expenses and just that small amount of money reimbursed and that concern taken away, that removes a significant barrier for a lot of people. But some of the big public bodies, you know, we have to have these mechanisms to allow us to do that, because that's one of the obvious barriers, you know, that's preventing some people from accessing and enjoying the outdoors. Now, Robert, you've still got your hand up. Would you like to make another contribution?
Yeah, I really interesting listening to all the conversations and the comments here. You know, I think, you know, the public bodies and large organisations are in a really awkward position, in that whilst they want to engage with these groups, they feel they haven't got the right staff. You know, sending a white male in to talk to some of these other communities and groups is the reality that that's all we've got right now. And yes, we need to we need to employ more staff. But one of the things we've started to try and do within Natural Resources Wales is look at what staff we have available. They might not work in recreation, they might work with, but we have got staff from other ethnic groups and other religious cultures, and can we bring them in to be our conduit with these groups? Whereas our traditional recreation staff might feel like they just don't have the skills and the knowledge, exactly as Yvonne was saying before, about, you know, feeling comfortable understanding that community group and what it is they might want. And I'm sure it's vice versa. You know, again, another white person coming to them going, oh, why don't you come into our woodlands and do this stuff? Whereas actually, if they have people from their own groups, then that connection will be a lot easier. You know, we're a long way off from that. We all know that. But I think we need to find some sort of interim whilst we get these staff in places that works for both sides, and we get that level of connection, because that's all it's need. The will's there, and I think the want is there from the groups, but we just make the connection work.
Yes, and I think there's a lot of practical things that we can do, you know, so even looking at our own recruitment and selection processes. Where do we try and recruit and advertise posts or opportunities for seasonal rangers, or for, I suppose, you know, jobs that are going to give people an entrance level opportunity to come into the sector and recreation? So I think we've also got to look at ourselves as public bodies and as agencies. Are we doing enough to actually reach out and to provide these opportunities, you know, to a wider sector of society, or are we still just trying to stay with the status quo? So I think you're right, Robert, there's more to be done, but also I think it's about this idea of looking at our own practices and what can we do to improve or enhance how we currently operate, and to reach out, as Pammy said, you know, this is really about us not waiting for people to come to us or to the outdoors. This is about us trying to go to a range of communities and groups to work with them and engage with them. And that takes time and it takes energy, but I think we've all got a responsibility to do that, and to do it more and to do it better. So we're going to move on times, obviously moving forward, and we want to now focus on what other stakeholders do we need to involve. So I'm looking for some new contributions in terms of who are the other stakeholders that we're currently not engaging with, that we should be speaking with or working in a kind of partnership approach with. So other stakeholders, any ideas or suggestions would be warmly welcome. Now again, just use the raise your hand icon if you would like to make a contribution, or stick it in the chat box and share that with us. Deborah, you still have your hand up. Do you want to come back in?
Sorry, I didn't think I have. I'm not showing that I've got my hand up. Sorry.
No problem. That's fine. So once again, we're thinking about what other stakeholders do we need to involve. Now, I think there's a number of opportunities that I see at a local level, certainly in terms of, you know, trees, woods and forests. We see a wide range of stakeholder groups that potentially we can connect with, and some of these are around obviously faith groups, some are specifically gender-based groups, so it might be a women's group, for example. So that's a type of idea. If we're not getting you know, to some of the groups who are basically are already established, are already out there. So it's not about reinventing and making new groups necessarily. This is potentially about us connecting with established or existing groups. But how do we identify them? And what Pammy was saying yesterday was really about the importance of us doing that sort of investigation and picking up the phone, doing the Googling and doing some of the searching. So we can do that both on a regional and a national level. But I think it's really interesting when you do that. Actually, what you start to see is obviously lots of groups out there who you never knew existed, and potentially who are, you know, on your doorstep. So I'm not seeing any other hands coming up here. I'll have a look at the chat and just see if we're getting any new points.
Hi, Kevin. It is Deborah again. Sorry. Just
Hi,
something I live. Hi. Yes. So back to this issue of engaging with lots of different groups. One group that I'm very interested in, an issue around London, is the religious, very orthodox religious Jewish groups who are starting to explore the countryside. For example, at Aldenham Country Park in Hertsmere, large groups of Orthodox Jews will visit these places, but making sure, for example, food, I was just about to type in the chat, the right food, understanding the whole issue about the cultural awareness, the stuff that's going on in the chat is absolutely vital, and knowing who to ask about that is really important. And I love the idea, someone suggested cultural, I think it's Yvonne has suggested cultural awareness sessions, and I think these are so important, but you have to understand what groups you have in your area, and then dig down and find the right person to talk about those groups as well. So but I think food's a really important hook when we get to the bit about hooks and things, that are making sure your group feels welcome, that those Orthodox Jews, when they arrive at Aldenham Country Park, realise that there is food there that, for example, is kosher, or Muslim groups realise that, yes, there is halal approved food there. I think that's really important for groups too.
Absolutely, thanks, Deborah. And I have a really fond memory. One of my colleagues, Hugh, who works in recreation as well, I was involved in working in partnership with a number of asylum seeker groups, and there was an Eritrean group who came out to obviously an urban woodland, and part of the focus was on sharing food. Now, they brought out coffee beans and started to roast the coffee beans, and they shared that, and some of the best coffee that any of us had ever tasted in the outdoors. So food is a great focal point, and it's a great way to break down barriers and bring people together. Now, Rumina, do you want to share briefly just some of your experience, because food really features so strongly in terms of bringing different groups together and sharing that cultural experience?
Yeah, I mean, it is similar to the video that you saw with them. I mean, International Peace Day was just one example, because that was quite a lot of groups that we'd worked throughout the year, and then obviously we came together for International Peace Day, and it was just they were able to do outdoor cooking, but also share with the other groups that had come out with them. Well, at that time it was Forestry Commission Scotland, but they could share what they'd already been doing with us, but also talk about I mean, basically they're making different types of teas, but we asked them to bring snacks that they would normally eat with those teas, and that, I think, just really connected everybody, because everybody, you know, it just brought them together. But I think with all the faith kind of celebrations we've done, that's always quite a big thing, like whether it's Diwali or whether it's Eid, or like you were saying, Deborah, about the Jewish community. We worked with the Scottish Council for Jewish Communities, and we had to basically ask those questions to them, because even when we were doing foraging and outdoor cooking, they wanted different pans for different dishes we were making. But again, that we had to do a lot of engagement and work. So a lot of the times when we're doing events, we do a lot of pre-engagement beforehand in the woodlands with smaller groups, and I guess that's where we do the community consultation as well, kind of sneakily kind of thing, for the main event. So yeah, and like Kevin was saying, like the whole, like, you know, having an outdoor fire, and then groups themselves are bringing like things like the coffee beans and making the coffee and everything, and that's a whole process they might have done in their own country. So yeah, food is definitely, but I know that's been a bit of a battle for me again, because we're a government organisation, because it's like, well, is that really a barrier to them getting access to the woods and forests? So again, that's something as staff we need to kind of try and make, you know, senior management and executive board members know that, well, that is the way we can get more people out in the woods. It might not be the barrier, and they might not want to fund it but you know, that is the way to draw people initially, kind of thing.
Absolutely. Thanks, Romina. So now we want to move on to focus on what are the 3 steps or the 3 key actions that you can commit to. So if we were looking at 3 takeaway actions to reduce barriers to participation, can you share your ideas in the chat or raise your hand and basically share with us some of the actions you think that we need to commit to and some of the actions that we need to consider? So just looking for those kind of key actions. Now, Robert, I see you still got your hand up. You get any new actions or contributions to make?
Oh no, sorry, I thought I took that down. No, I've just put it in the chat. You know, we need to open up those communication channels and make contact with those local groups. It's not about trying to, you know, I think it's fairly obvious, but we're not trying to encourage every group, because we want the groups that are local, that use the site, and other people, and you know, market the sites as being, we are trying to make this sudden change and develop sites, but it starts with communication. It's just talking to people and making those links. And how we do that, you know, we need to go out and as public bodies and make those connections, but likewise we need to find how we can make it easier for the groups to connect with us as well.
Yeah, and you did mention earlier, Robert, which I think is a very valid point. It's in terms of the images that we use in our promotional materials and the types of key communication messages. So we've got to make sure that those messages are inclusive and that imagery is inclusive, but we've got to go beyond that basically and make sure that, you know, that's not tokenistic in the same way. So it's how do we do that, and how do we do that working in consultation and working with groups and communities. Now, there's a lot of comments coming in the chat at the moment here, really talking about, you know, different organisations, the staff and the volunteer groups. Just trying to pick out a couple of points. Yeah, genuine intention from our organisation. So there has to be that commitment. I think is really important. And certainly that's one of the lessons that we've learned in Scotland at a national level. If the national parks or the public bodies are making that commitment, it's long term. It's not to make it short term